UA in English is on air. We broadcast from the heart of Europe. It's Ukraine. My name is Anna Nichenko. Hello. And today, the 26 days in the Russian military has been vainly trying to find imaginary Nazis from whom they allegedly wanted to defend our people, said our President Volodymyr Zelensky, and he added, just as they are vainly trying to find Ukrainians who would meet them with flowers, they don't meet them with flowers because more than 100 people have been killed in the Donetsk region since Russia began its invasion of Ukraine. But these statistics do not take into account the number of people killed in Mariupol and Volnovakha. Due to the constant shelling of these cities, it's hard to give the full amount. Our correspondent will tell the stories of the worst days in the life of these people. Let's watch the material.
My temple is sewn up, my nose is sewn up, my eyebrow is cut above this eye.
Kramatorsk resident Nina Petrina received shrapnel wounds as a result of the attack on the city. The woman suffered for the second time from the shelling of the occupiers. 2 weeks ago, a fragment of the downed rocket damaged her home.
The vestibule door, along with the closed lock, was blown out. The double front door was split in half. We asked if we could stay with our relatives. There is a vacant apartment above them. People left it earlier, so we settled in their home.
As a result of yesterday's explosions, more than 40 houses in Kramatorsk were left without windows and balconies. All the victims who are now being treated in the city hospital were at home at the time of explosion. Vitaly has injuries to his eyes and hand. Neighbors helped him to get out of the room.
First explosion, the windows fell down. I'm on the first floor and from the upper floors. The second explosion followed immediately. I was knocked over. Then I got up, couldn't see anything. Got out to the entrance by feel. Then people helped.
Kramatorsk resident Igor, who like many of his neighbors was at home at the time of the explosion, did not immediately understand whether he was injured or not. He says that he didn't think about pain, but there was only one thought in his head: how to get out.
I didn't know. I was in shock. My heel was broken. Nevertheless, I could walk. I didn't notice it. I didn't pay attention to anything. My left leg is stitched up. Here it is sewn up. There is a broken leg, but we don't pay attention to scratches.
Here in the hospital, people don't talk about their wounds and pain, but they worry about destroyed houses. They say the worst thing is to lose a home.
It is hard to describe. Everything was torn from the blast waves. Duct, tape, windows and plastic, everything was destroyed. Frames, window sills, iron doors, wooden doors, everything cracked. Well, the blast wave was a big one.
All victims are under round-the-clock medical supervision, and despite all the pain and fears, they believe in a prompt victory and peace in Ukraine.
We believe in victory. We are a strong nation. Everything will be fine. We will still do sports.
Reported by Olena Shustova and Olena Gramova, UATV News.
Our program joins my colleague Vitaly Sizov, US special correspondent in Europe. Hello, Vitaly.
Hello.
Thank you that you usually join our program and explain really important things. Today I'd like to ask you about support of Russia, support of Europe, support of USA. Who support whom? Ukrainians made their choice 80 years ago, and when rescuing Jews, people of Israel, now you have that choice, said Volodymyr Zelensky, our president, addressing to the politicians and the people of Israel. At that time, thousands of people in Israel came out to support Ukraine. So we have support of people, ordinary people in Israel. We have support in Great Britain, and also we know that, by the way, Daily Mail published information that British Prime Minister Boris Johnson plans to travel to Kiev to support us. Whether it's true or not, what you know. Your meaning, now we have support of Europe and USA. Is it enough or not?
As about Boris Johnson, it's very interesting information. I don't have any proof of this, but this step would be logical because he pay a lot of attention to topic of Ukraine. And by the way, during the last meeting with his colleagues, he even said that resistance of Ukraine in some kind is resemble Brexit. He was criticized because of this statement, but it it shows how the topic of Ukraine important for Boris Johnson, and in terms of this, his visit would be very predictable, especially when Kiev was visited by other European leader. About Israel, this country is in a very tough geopolitical position, and that's why their governments are forced to be more flexible toward Russia than other country of EU and Great Britain and United States. But it does not mean that the people of Israel do not support Ukraine.
I think you watched this big interview which Zelensky gave to CNN, and our president repeated that Ukraine won't compromise on its territorial integrity and sovereignty. And then TV host called Zelensky a man of a moment. Let's watch here.
On today's show, the man of the moment, Volodymyr Zelensky. I will ask the Ukrainian president how his country is defending itself from the Russian invasion and what he needs from Western powers to keep up the fight. We'll discuss the end game of this tragic conflict. Is compromise possible with Putin, a man President Biden has termed a war criminal? I will ask about the personal toll that this is taking on him, his family, and his country.
And also Bill Maher, a famous American comedian, also said that now Zelensky in the United States is currently even more popular than Biden. Finally, America has a president whom everyone loves with a close rating approval. But in spite of that, it's Ukrainian president, not American. How do you think, Vitaly, now Volodymyr Zelensky, he is more often called as a leader of Eurasia. What do you think about this?
I just have seen this TV show when Zelensky was called the very good president. Then speaker said that we have a very good president. This is president of Ukraine. Yeah. He's very popular. He became very popular figure in west part of the world, and for many analysts, Zelensky could be the leader of new generation of Eurasia. Yes, because he's very popular in this territory, and he have very attractive image for Western viewers, people especially in Western part of the world, because it's a very, I don't know how even describe this, it's a very Hollywood maybe story when former comedian, former person who work in show business, he became very effective in resistance against the absolute evil which represent now Vladimir Putin, and of course the personality of Zelensky has a very positive influence on image of whole Ukraine, and he became a factor of geopolitics even, because in social media a lot of people they even make some joke in TikTok that every day he check on Zelensky. It allows Ukraine to preserve this enormous attention from ordinary average people who pressure, and this attention influence political agenda in their country.
And you know that You know that Kiev was shelled today again, once again, and we will now see the consequences, yes, of this shelling. Again, usual ordinary people suffered. It was civil, it wasn't some military object as usual. And the next round of negotiations is scheduled for today. Usually, Russia is shooting more intensive in the day of negotiations. What do you think? What should we wait today from this situation and as a result of this negotiation?
All people, they of course hope that ceasefire is possible and the withdrawing of Russian military forces from Ukraine. And all people, of course, expect on this that Russia eventually withdraw its weapon, its military stuff from Ukraine. But unfortunately, there are no signs that Russia is ready to do it. But all we will see what agreement will be reached during this negotiation. Hope for the best.
And also talking about support from different kinds of people, from actors, yeah, I don't know, from medical workers, from politicians. We know that President Volodymyr Zelensky, he had a video call with the star couple Ashton Kutcher and Mila Kunis, and they raised $35 million to help refugees from Ukraine. It's also help from actors, it's also help from different people. And we know that David Beckham borrowed his Instagram account to Ukrainian doctor for one day. Not for a long time, but nevertheless, it's a help. We know that Pope Francis also asked to stop war. At the same time, Russian invaders opened fire at the European Bible Seminary. As a result of enemy shelling, a fire broke out. What do you think? What can stop? Not Putin. We understand that it's a crazy man, but not Putin, but Russian people, Russian military. Don't they see the whole picture, not from TV shows, but the real picture here in Ukraine, what they are doing?
Unfortunately, from my point of view, it is possible just through the losses. When Russian army suffer high losses, it influences the political agenda in their country. And as you know, the previous demands of Russia were absolutely unreal to Ukraine. Now they were forced by Ukrainian army to limit their demands, and unfortunately, we see that just losses help ordinary people to understand all situation. Because unfortunately there are no free media in Russia. In this situation, personality of Zelensky helped a lot because he was very popular in Russia. And unfortunately, now we have just some social networks to reach the Russian audience, but Zelensky used it very effective. And his former colleagues from Ukrainian show business, they use it effective too. And we will hope that of course, it could take a lot of time, but the public opinion of Russia will change, and we will see some, I don't know, changes in political agenda of Russia, maybe some coup d'etat in Russia. Hope for it.
It's really important to see these changes in political agenda, and it's really important for people, for Russians, to see the real picture. Thank you, Vitaly. Vitaly Sizov, UA special correspondent in Europe, was online. Almost 3/4 at the same time of Russians' population support the war against Ukraine. Let's watch the amount, numbers and data.
At the end of February, an absolute majority, 65% of the respondents in Russia, believed that Putin's decision to conduct the so-called special operation in Ukraine was the right. A week after the invasion, there were even more of these people, plus 3%. This is shown by the survey conducted by the Public Opinion Foundation. Even though business has begun to leave Russia massively, prices are rising and the ruble is rapidly falling daily.
I support Putin. It should have been done a long time ago. My opinion, to protect the Russians, I support it all. Putin is probably a wise man and knows what he is doing.
My opinion, he did right, because the West has gone completely insane. It does a hell of a sin, says all kinds of lies about Russia, and nobody is bombing Kyiv. I don't believe it.
Yet many Russians do not change their mind, despite journalists showing them pictures of bombed Ukrainian cities and completely destroyed homes of civilians.
Of course, I took it very hard at first, because it's our brotherly people, but we are not responsible for it. The bridgehead was being prepared there, a whole generation was raised to hate Russia, the Russians, for many years. Ukraine was being prepared for an attack on Russia. I'm absolutely sure of that. The nationalist battalions and Nazis, they didn't disappear. Actually, Russia is not bombing. It is getting rid of people who have seized power in dishonest way and are terrorizing their own citizens. They are not bombing. They are targeting the wreckers.
Why attack if our people are there? All of our people are there, Ukraine, Belarus. But it happened. I don't know. That's not what they say on the news. I don't hear Putin having deployed troops specifically for war.
And they don't hear it because 3/4 of all Russians learn about the war from the news on state-owned Russian TV channels. That's why they repeat all the narratives the propagandists tell them practically round the clock.
They are for war. For example, not because they are for war, but because they think everyone is for war. Because it's such sort of proper trend, you know.
Notably, in the Rostov region of Russia neighboring Ukraine, far more residents interviewed by journalists are against the war. Either confirms was that occupiers are more frequently transported there, or more truthful information is received there.
To hell the war!
I am opposed to war, like all people, I guess. Nobody wants war. Everyone wants peace, I think.
People are dying. War has never brought anything good.
It is interesting that, according to the same survey of sociologists, the number of people who support the work of the government has increased by 1.5 times in recent weeks. And there were 10% less Russians who noticed rising food prices. And these results could have been received not as a result of falsification, only because the population began to watch more TV in chase of news about the war. And there it never gets tired of telling people that everything is fine in Russia and that prices for goods are not rising.
If there is something Putin has been very successful at, it is zombifying his audience. And the nation is in a completely defective, monstrous, morally broken, intellectually degraded state. It is necessary to put brains and souls into place. And the Son of Dragons says it's hard work, worse than embroidery, hard and lengthy. It is important to start it as soon as possible.
Another possible reason for growing loyalty to the government's actions is that many more negatively minded people have begun to refuse to answer psychologists' questions. This directly affects the results, and it might be related to the recently adopted Russian law on punishment for disseminating allegedly untrustworthy information about the actions of the Russian military. Up to 15 years in prison can be imposed for information deemed untruthful by the authorities.
We live in such a country, it is better not to comment unnecessarily. I am not going to comment, after all, I work here. I don't want to go into the woods tomorrow. Why did Putin give the order to attack Ukraine? I somehow don't want to tell that because we might be in danger for that. I'd rather refrain.
Actually, it was not the level of support for Putin's actions that changed, but the price for the non-support. Since in such a situation the purpose of propaganda was not only to change people's mind, but also to silence them. To voice their opinions, even the elite are often scared.
Even the elites have difficulty accepting the new monstrous reality they are facing, but they understand very well that any statement or step against it is the end of a career, the end of a prosperous life, maybe even the end of life itself, because Putin is most scared of and despises and destroys those people he considers betrayers.
Political analysts believe that international sanctions will result in a daily decrease in the number of Russians who agreed to live in a fantasy world distorted by television. After all, nothing clears the brain like a blow to the pocket and the empty fridge. Reported by Roman Smoler, Natalia Voloshina, UATV News.
And now I'll show you a real picture in Ukraine, what's going on. We will show you a material about small city, Severodonetsk in Lugansk region. It's in the east of Ukraine. It was a peaceful city until Russian troops came. Let's watch.
Сегодня, 20 марта.
I am at the market in Severodonetsk. This is what the local market looks like today. The situation in the town remains difficult. I'm looking down because there is debris lying everywhere. So the situation remains tense. The Russian Federation continues to bomb the town. As I was able to find out, heavy flamethrower systems have been brought in, which are causing such fires and destruction. Parts of the town have no electricity and gas supply. I live among the lucky ones. Today I woke up with a runny nose, a sore throat. It is very cold in the apartment because there is snow outside. It is winter. It is difficult to live in conditions without heating. So I am sick. There is no way to get medicine. Pharmacies are closed. And those few pharmacies that are open, there is nothing in them. I was treated with the medicines I could get before the war, which were in my home first aid kit. People cooked their food near the entrances of their houses on open fires because there was no gas. Food can be found at the humanitarian headquarters, which distributes it free of charge, and almost daily humanitarian aid is brought to the Luhansk region from other regions. Yesterday I learned such an interesting fact. The cost of 1 liter of gasoline in our town is 300 hryvnias per liter. Imagine that. Gas stations do not work. Those citizens who were able to get gasoline to stock it before the war or to bring it from other areas set that price, starting from 300 hryvnias. Because trips around the town are very expensive. Cabs can take from 500 hryvnias and more, even though the town is not big. If you hire a taxi outside the city, if it is a private vehicle, the cost to get to the city of Dnipro starts at 5,000 hryvnias. The cost of a trip to Lviv can be as much as 15,000 hryvnias. As I said, the situation in Severodonetsk remains tense. Russian troops continue to shell the town. A lot of houses and a lot of infrastructures have been destroyed. Due to the fact that the occupants keep opening fire, it is extremely difficult to repair, restore light, heat, gas, so people are forced to sit for a week, 2-3 weeks without any basic amenities. Battles continue for Rubizhne and Popasna. There are street fights going on there. Ukrainian troops are trying to push back the Russian troops beyond the town. The situation in Lysychansk and Rubizhne is difficult. The towns continue to be shelled. Recently, the occupants drove a tank to a nursing home in Kremenna and shelled it in close proximity. 56 people were killed. Apparently, according to the Russian Federation, this is the way to liberate settlements not only from I don't know what, but also from life. The number of casualties in the Luhansk region is not known precisely because fighting is constantly going on. Therefore, the number of victims is literally increasing by the hour. I know that people are trying to leave the Luhansk region, but a lot of people are staying. Women, small children continue to stay. So the Russian Federation is shelling residential areas, saying that they are shelling military infrastructure. It seems like something extremely ridiculous because women and children cannot defend themselves. And why the Russian Federation is doing this is something no one can say.
Volodymyr Dubovik, director of the Center for International Studies, joins our program. Hello, Mr. Dubovik.
Hello, good to see you.
Glad to see you also, and let's talk about position of Russia today. China is considering any form of military assistance to Russia. This was stated by the head of Chinese diplomacy. Now we have two super countries, USA and China. Can Russia gain something by this invading of Ukraine except sanctions?
Well, I don't know. I mean, they still haven't reached any of their goals so far. I mean, they've already used a lot of time and lives of their soldiers and tons of money, obviously, on preparing this invasion and carrying out this invasion, but they haven't reached any of their goals. I mean, there are some troops here and there in Ukraine, but they haven't taken any big cities, and their offensive is stalled right now. They're bogged down in several places, to the extent that they've reached what military experts call a culminating moment, meaning that they couldn't advance further. So we'll see. I mean, right now it's really close to a stalemate, you know, some kind of a situation when no side can actually reclaim initiative. And it could be a prolonged war, it could be so-called trench warfare, when two sides, Ukraine and Russia, would continue to, you know, shell each other for a long time. The only problem for us, of course, is that they're also shelling the civilian sector, where we have a lot of victims and casualties. That's a problem. Other than this, it could be a long war, I'm afraid. And Peskov, press secretary of Putin, has said already today that Ukraine is not ready for serious peace deal negotiations, which means that Ukraine is not willing to surrender and give up on its sovereignty and territorial integrity, which is, you know, a refreshing and encouraging sign to a lot of Ukrainians who don't want for President Zelensky and his administration to surrender. But we'll see. In terms of China, I still hope that they would make this mistake of supporting Russia openly, specifically with sending them some weapons.
And now, maybe you read this article from Wall Street Journal. They wrote that Russia, failing to achieve early victory in Ukraine, is seen shifting to Plan B, tactical shift 6, to pressure Ukraine into accepting neutrality and Russian territorial claims. Do Russia has Plan B, what kind of, and can we just prognose now something?
Well, they're improvising. That's what we can see and say for sure. They're definitely improvising. They're looking for the way out. Their Plan A didn't work, and then they're looking daily, basically, what they're going to do next. The same Wall Street Journal also wrote a piece, I think, quite recently, a few hours ago, where they think that Russia will now be focusing on east and south of Ukraine, well, primarily southeast of Ukraine, where they want to consolidate their gains, you know, north of Azov Sea and in the Donetsk, Luhansk regions as well, as their priority, because they couldn't really move too far for quite a long time now. They couldn't capture Mykolaiv, which is a great news, obviously, to my hometown of Odessa. And then they couldn't really take Kyiv. They are standing on the outskirts of Kharkiv and Sumy, but there's no advance there either. So apparently it looks like they might just capitalize on the ground and on the gains, territorial gains that they've received over in the south and east of Ukraine. But we'll see. I mean, if there is a peace deal or ceasefire at least in the coming weeks, would they like to keep those lands they've gained after February 24th, or would they actually retreat to the lands of Donetsk and Luhansk, so-called People's Republics? Situation is very dynamic. Like I said, there is basically a stalemate between the sides on the war ground, on the battleground, and very much depends on how our military forces would continue to defend our lands heroically. Well, can we withstand the pressure? Can the West provide us with even more useful weapons for the Ukrainian military? And whether the West would actually even elevate the level of sanctions against Russia. So there are many elements in play. And so far, it's hard to say how it's going to turn out in the coming weeks.
And talking about help to Russia, because now Russian Federation is looking for new friends like Brazil, India, as we call China, and South Africa, whether they are ready. Let's talk about this, but first let's watch a small material.
Vladimir Putin is seeking allies for his war against Ukraine. According to Western media, Kremlin has asked China for help. The New York Times said that Putin apparently is asking for economic assistance to counter the Western sanctions. The Financial Times added that Russia asked for military equipment, including such weaponry as drones. According to other sources, Kremlin is also asking for food. It's worth to mention that China at least officially provides a very diplomatic response, calling to end the war. Who supports Russia among the world's countries? The closest ally, both territorial and ideological, is Belarus. Recently, the self-proclaimed president of Belarus, Alexander Lukashenko, visited Putin in Moscow. Mass media said that Putin tried to convince Lukashenko to join the war against Ukraine. General Staff of the Armed Forces and National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine have repeatedly reported about the possibility of invasion of Belarus units. Earlier, Lukashenko led the Russian units through his country to cross the Belarus-Ukraine border. The country is a member of the Eurasian Economic Union and depends on Kremlin a lot. It is also a member of the Collective Security Treaty Organization with Russia at its core. Chechen Republic of Kadyrov and Buryatia are not serious allies, as soon as the first ones are just paid mercenaries and do not represent Chechens, and Buryats are just cannon fodder for any Putin's war. There are almost no obvious Putin supporters in Europe. The dictator and his country became toxic and dangerous for the reputation, but still some countries with Russian influence in the past support him in Latin America. In the Middle East, Syria is perhaps Russia's closest ally. 7 years ago, Putin supported the dictatorship of Bashar Assad. Kremlin has covered the use of chemical weapons against the civilian population of Syria, and Russian troops have bombed the residential districts of Syria. Today, Russia has set up a mobilization compound, and volunteers are promised from $300 to $600. One more underestimated ally of the Kremlin is North Korea. Same management, same attitude to own people and to the West. Same perspectives.
So who are now friends of Russia, and what do you think, can Russia get some new friends?
Oh, I think they're pretty much isolated right now, and even so-called friends, they are not really friends. I mean, they are not friends in the sense that they will provide some assistance to Russia. They would probably, the best scenario for Russia would be for them to keep their neutrality. Neither Brazil or India is going to do anything to help Russia militarily or economically. That's for sure. And then the Belarus is a specific case, obviously, because we're seeing that Moscow wants to, to force Belarusian troops into Ukraine. That if that happens, that would be upsetting the delicate balance on the battleground. So that would stretch our front line even further. And that's problematic for Ukrainian troops. No, but having said that, of course, we know about the Belarusian military don't have a mood or sentiment that would actually push them to fight Ukrainian brothers. So we'll see what happens there. In terms of the actual support, the big, massive support, be it financial or military supplies, can actually come only from China. And hopefully China heard President Biden the other day when he talked to the Chinese leader and would not do this, provide Russia with military support. They will work politically together. China will continue their propaganda campaign against the West and NATO and US, being to be blamed for the conflict in Ukraine. They would help Russia economically by buying its natural gas and oil and things like that. But I hope that they will refrain themselves from actually sending any military supplies to Russia.
Hmm. And today, US President Joe Biden must hold telephone talks with Macron. Scholz, will it bring some results? What do you think?
I hope so, because there is incredible pressure now on Scholz, primarily because he is under pressure to cut even further the energy sales from Russia, because Germany is buying a lot of gas from Russia. Other countries buy oil as well. Actually, Russia got the record amount of money since February 24th, since the start of this invasion. They've got the most they ever got, because the prices for both oil and gas are high now, and many in the West are still buying those from Russia, and that's a problem because it's a big loophole in the sanctions. I mean, what's the point of the sanctions if you continue to deal with Russia in the sphere of energy like nothing happened, like business as usual? So I think that Biden would rather continue to push their European allies, his European allies, to do more on sanctions, because America, of course, already introduced the embargo on oil sales from Russia. If European countries would do that, that would be a big deal. And we've just learned, actually, I think in a matter of last few hours, that Germany actually signed a big contract with Qatar, if I'm not mistaken, but from Persian Gulf, to buy some on their natural gas. So Germany is looking for diversifying their routes, their sources of supply of energy, so not to depend on Russia entirely. But right now, it would be very helpful to Ukraine if those countries in the West that are buying Russian energy resources would cut on doing that drastically.
Volodymyr, I have one more question, but first I'd like to show you one video material about influence of this war in Ukraine, in our country, in heart of Europe, but it influences on many countries and, for example, on Afghanistan. Let's watch.
A World Food Programme official is worried that the war in Ukraine will further increase food and fuel prices in Afghanistan, where 95% of Afghans already cannot afford enough to eat properly. In an interview Friday, Shelley Takral, spokeswoman for the World Food Programme, told the Associated Press that the food prices in Afghanistan are already up 40% and there are significant dangers of further increases.
The worrying thing, I think, and this includes Afghanistan as well as all the other hunger spots across the world, is the rise in food and fuel prices. And that's something that we were already at an all-time high in February this year, according to FAO statistics. And this I think is what we're going to have to monitor as the days and the weeks of the conflict in Ukraine goes on.
Already this year, the World Food Programme has spent $1 billion feeding millions of Afghans, but needs another $1.6 billion. And Takral said donor countries will have to dig deeper as the crisis in Ukraine deepens. While much of Afghanistan's wheat supplies come from Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, Takral said the increase in food and fuel costs as a result of the war in Ukraine could add as much as 10 to 20% to the cost of providing humanitarian assistance.
Unfortunately, conflicts exacerbate hunger with the migration and just people leaving, and you've heard the stories of people just leaving with very little. Their cash is, their cash needs to transfer into a currency that they can use wherever they are. So, but right now in Afghanistan, what we need to sustain is, the attention on the people here.
In the markets in Kabul, there is food, but on Friday, Masihullah, who runs a small stall, said no one has money. A sack of flour costs nearly $28, a near impossible price for the few who still have work. Most Afghans are now below the poverty level, which means they earn $1 and $9 a day or less. But most people don't have jobs, Masihullah said.
If the countries we import from face a challenge, we face a challenge. Now there is war between Russia and Ukraine, so we are affected. Our economy has fallen and even getting worse. The prices of food are getting higher day by day. There is a high increase in rates of oil and wheat, and there is huge difference in prices.
The grim statistics keep on coming. Takral said 80% of Afghans are in debt because they have had to borrow to pay for food or medicine. 100% of women-led households do not have enough food, and even working Afghans look to the World Food Programme for food because they don't make enough to be able to afford the food in the market.
Volodymyr, can you explain us which countries already feel the consequences of war in Ukraine and maybe will feel in some time?
Yeah, I mean, quite a few countries feel the hit already. Afghanistan, and then the countries where they already had problems with food supply, like Yemen and others. What can I say? I feel sorry for them, but so they are becoming this indirect victims of Russian aggression as well. we might have problems here with food security. Report by, I don't remember by which organization, international organization, watching and monitoring these issues, that if the war becomes protracted, if it goes on for a long time here in Ukraine, we'll also be having a lot of people here in Ukraine living under poverty line. So that's a problem for us, and it's a problem for everyone else, because not just Ukraine, but also Russia is one of the major exporters of various grain, food, and so on, the foodstuff to various countries. So these countries should just pressure collectively or individually, provide more pressure on Moscow to stop the war. And that's how we're going to avoid this international hunger in various countries and famine, which is pretty much artificial. If you stop the war, if Ukrainians are being able to return to work and work with their land and provide more of a harvest for the entire world to consume, that will be the better. But of course, many regions in Ukraine is not in position right now to do that. And therefore, it's a problem not just for us, for the entire world. Russian aggression is already sending waves of instability and problems for the rest of the world.
Hunger can really become a big problem now after this war in our country. Thank you for your explanations. I'll remind our viewers, Volodymyr Dubovik, Director of the Center for International Studies, was online in our program. Also want to show me the real picture here in Ukraine. I want to show you one more material from Donetsk, from Donetsk region, from east of Ukraine, to show you the real picture, how the Severodonetsk police work in wartime. They, for example, deliver humanitarian aid to shelters and help evacuate people. In addition to their usual duties, police officers take on many other tasks during the war. Watch more details about how they help the population in the city of Severodonetsk in the East Ukraine in our material.
The 25th day of the war changed the lives of thousands of Ukrainians. Today, all services work in the realities of warfare. There are more tasks for the police in the city of Severodonetsk in the Luhansk region. Now they help deliver targeted humanitarian aid to shelters.
There are no words. I now stutter because of everything that's happening in Ukraine.
As it turned out, we are too old to walk. Did you get transferred? Yes.
They take food and hygiene products from the humanitarian headquarters. Because there is no gas and electricity in the entire area of Severodonetsk, people have to cook on fires near the entrance. Therefore, now the humanitarian aid mostly consists of canned food, packaged soups, noodles, and everything that can be easily cooked near the entrance using a small fire.
How long have you been cooking like this?
For 2 weeks, and no one knows how long it will last.
More than 100 houses have been destroyed in Severodonetsk. Therefore, police officers help to move people to relatives and friends in those houses that have survived. More than half of the population of Severodonetsk refuses to evacuate from the city.
How many of you are left? Are there a lot of you? 5 people at the entrance. Here, 5 people are here. We have nowhere to go. Tell us about your conditions. We don't have anything, no gas, there is no light, water. Is there a place for you to hide? I'm hiding in the storage room. You have no idea what are the conditions. Here are my hands. I come here quickly. I have 2 cats. I feed them and run back. Unbearable. 4th floor. Already tired from every rustle. We don't understand who shoots and how, whether it's coming from us or towards us. We hide from every rustle.
There are corpses in the streets. There is no one to take them away due to constant hostilities. Houses are burning. Ukrainian police officers admit there is no time for sleep now.
We deliver food, hygiene products, and some basic necessities to people in dangerous areas where volunteers do not go. We try to keep in touch with people to write down what they need.
I saw that you are transporting people to other areas where there is electricity and heating.
Yes, sometimes people come up and ask for your help to move them to other areas, especially if they have somewhere to go.
Police work around the clock trying to help the residents of the city and ensure order in Severodonetsk. Reported by Marina Stepanenko, Anastasia Volkova, UATV News.
Alexei Zhak, head of department at National Institute of Strategic Studies, joins our program. Hello, can you hear me?
Hello.
Thank you that you joined. What do you think? Usually, when you have the day of negotiations, there are lots of shooting, and Russia increases this shooting. Russia couldn't destroy our army; it tries to destroy our infrastructure. What do you think? What should we wait today?
Sorry, what is?
I'll repeat, during all the negotiations, when you have negotiations between Ukraine and Moscow, we have increasing of shooting from Russia. What do you think? Negotiations are planned for today, for 21st of March. What should we wait today? Can we prognose something?
It's difficult to prognose because the war is going to a new stage, which is some sort of trench war when Russia tries to keep territories already seized without further advancement to new territories, because Russia has no force for it, no power for it, and no resources for it. So this new stage is more dangerous for population, because Russia seems to use all its high precision weapons, and now Russia uses old weapons like heavy artillery, which destroys Ukrainian infrastructure. And I believe Russia has to see that no way to continue this war this way, and it will not bring Russia victory over Ukraine. So we will wait for another more constructive posture from Russia for these negotiations.
Do you think Joe Biden flies to Brussels on March 23rd to discuss the situation in Ukraine at NATO, G7 and European Union summit? Can we prognose, at least at this case, something from summits, some results?
I think Ukrainian partners have now to design new policy in the stage of the war, when the war becomes more position war without huge advancement from Russia. But this war should be ended. I believe that the major point of this new policy is connected with the upcoming summit of NATO. Maybe not of EU, because EU may just put new sanctions, but NATO may design new policy to support Ukraine to win this war.
Told that they are ready to expand sanctions against Russia and affecting more banks and sectors of the economy. How can Russian economy take long? I don't know. How can it be? How can it exist with these all sanctions? And what can we wait from USA? More strict sanctions?
Maybe more strict sanctions should be implied on Russia in case of Russia attempt to use more destructive weapons against Ukraine, because sanctions as they are already powerful enough, not killing Russian economy, but powerful enough, and we have some time to see what is effect. It's already huge, but maybe in month or two, Russia will not be able to continue this war as a country. So new sanctions should be well designed to limit Russian power to continue this war. I cannot prognose what should be done else, but my view is that Russia economy may survive in this situation no more than several months.
Thank you, Alexei. Thank you for your explanations. Alexei Jacques, head of department at National Institute for Strategic Studies, was online in our program. And talking about the situation for the last 24 hours, I'd like also to show you one material and say that Putin no longer aims to seize Kyiv, but rather to force Ukraine to surrender in southern and eastern territories. Now, how it was, let's watch in our story.
Charred walls, broken windows and a pile of rocks. This is what is left of one of Kyiv's shopping malls. Last night, Russian troops destroyed it with a missile strike. There is already information in the network that the missile could have been launched from the territory of Belarus. A fire broke out on the site and the upper floors of the building caught fire. Windows in neighboring houses blew out. As a result of the attack, 4 people were killed. 1 was wounded. Heavy artillery has been pulled into the city of Kharkiv by Russian troops. The shelling in the city does not stop. The occupiers are mainly targeting ordinary multi-story buildings and civilian infrastructure. Russia launched 2 missile strikes on one of the military ranges in the Rivne region. It happened on the morning of March 21st.
Today, in the Rivne region, an air raid alarm sounded 3 times. 2 missile strikes were carried out at one of the military ranges. A special commission is working at the site. We will provide details later.
In Odessa, the morning also began with explosions. There is a naval battle near the city. Eyewitnesses report that 2 Russian ships have been spotted off the coast. One of them has already been shot down by our servicemen. Russian occupants also don't miss an opportunity to get their hands on Ukrainian goods. And this night, 5 ships with several tens of thousands of tons of grain were stolen from the seaport in Berdyansk. As a result of shelling by the Russian occupants, 1 ammonia tank in the city of Sumy was damaged. The State Emergencies Service reported that there was no threat to the city because of a gas leak, but the village of Novoselitsa was under threat. The radius of the affected area is 2.5 kilometers. Rescuers are still working on the site. There are no reports about victims or casualties. Heavy fighting and bombardments continue in the city of Mariupol as residents shifted across destroyed buildings and shelters in an effort to survive living in the city. Russian forces continue to push for the capture of Mariupol as it strategically allows Russian forces from the south and Russian troops in eastern parts of Ukraine to link up. The Russians deliver an ultimatum to the city defenders. First, surrender, then humanitarian corridors for the population. However, Mariupol refused such an offer. City officials said more than 2,000 people had died so far in Mariupol, with some buried in mass graves. Reported by Marina Stepanenko, UATV News.
And we'll show you more video and information, give you more information about this city, Mariupol. At least 2,030 people were killed so far in the city of Mariupol since Russia started its invasion of Ukraine. People are buried in mass graves. Russian forces continue to push for the capture of Mariupol, as it is strategically allows Russian forces from the south and Russian troops in the eastern parts of Ukraine to link up. Let's watch.
Heavy fighting and bombardments continue in the city of Mariupol in the east of Ukraine, as residents shifted across destroyed buildings and shelters in an effort to survive living in the city. Valentina, a Mariupol resident, sat outside alongside her neighbor and their dogs as sounds of shelling echoed in the background.
We have a cat in the basement. The cat is hiding during bombardments. Our dog barks sometimes.
They bomb nearby again. Local residents are walking amongst debris caused by the fighting, carrying bags of pushing carts of food and supplies. Dead bodies laid in clear view, covered in dust, on the ground among the debris. According to local authorities, the siege has caused shortages of food, water and energy supplies.
From the first day of the war, the Dnipropetrovsk region received almost 13,000 people. These are residents of Kharkiv, Lugansk and Donetsk region. Those who were able to escape from the blockaded city of Mariupol in the east of Ukraine talk about the inhuman trials in this city. Inhuman trials, Russian troops did these cases.
68-year-old Larisa Yeroshina, together with her husband, grandson and his wife, were able to leave the burning and destroyed Mariupol. People have already spent a day in the calm Dnipro city, but a woman still remembers the faces of those who remained in their hometown.
When we left the city, there were shootings. There were no roads. We barely left Mariupol. It's impossible to talk. Young children are there. Our neighbor just gave birth to a girl. There is nothing in the city at all. There is no food. They sit in the basement. The shops are all broken. People just survive.
Death is everywhere in Mariupol, says Larisa. When their relative died, she was buried right in the churchyard. People are dying whole families and are still under the rubble of residential buildings while the city is bombed.
We were proud of the city. It was so beautiful. Unfortunately, there is no city at all. It's almost ruined. We didn't see a single house that wasn't destroyed. We didn't see living people. Only the dead lay.
According to officials, 40,000 people have already left Mariupol during the blockade, but tens of thousands remain there and are waiting for help.
There is no light, no water, no gas. People take water where their dogs used to drink. They take this water, cut down trees near the houses and cook food on fire, at least drink hot tea.
Larisa's family does not stay in the Dnipro. They decided to move further to western Ukraine. Reported by Marina Stepanenko, Natalia Bilokudra, UATV News.
I'd like to give you one number. More than 100 children were dead in this war. It's really great, number, and it shows the real picture of situation here in Ukraine and Russian invasion of Ukraine. Also want you to show one material about support of Ukraine as a country, support of Ukrainian people. Let's watch.
Over 3 million Ukrainians moved abroad and more than 6 million left for the western regions of Ukraine. This is just an approximate number of refugees. Assisting them is a top priority, so the president of Ukraine instructed the government to develop a program to support IDPs.
The first component is financial. Government support for all displaced people, adults and children. The state provision for employment wherever they are staying temporarily. So that every family has a basis for living. The second component is about housing. The government is preparing specific proposals to provide housing for displaced people right now, as well as to organize the reconstruction of destroyed housing once the war is over.
The loss of jobs is one of the main challenges resulting from the current situation. A one-time payment program in the amount of 6,500 hryvnias is now in effect, especially for people turned jobless. However, despite the complicated circumstances, there will be no humanitarian catastrophe for the whole country, the president's office informs.
We have enough reserves of wheat, corn, sunflower oil, base products in warehouses and grain elevators for 3 and 5 years, because we always exported from 70 to 80% of these products, so we are sure to sustain ourselves.
Also, the government is aware that victory in the war is impossible without a strong economic base. That is why an unprecedented package of measures to support businesses was adopted. The fuel tax is reduced. Inspections has been cancelled. Cheap loans are provided at zero interest rate, and all imports are facilitated as much as possible. However, the key thing is that taxes have been cut revolutionarily.
First of all, we are talking about the actual implementation of the simplified system for a large number of companies whose turnover is up to 10 billion hryvnias. This is a very strong support for business, taking into account all current circumstances. Besides, it is a simplified system under which 2% of turnover is to be paid. No longer value-added tax or other types of taxes to be paid. We are in fact moving to a real, I would say, large-scale liberalization.
The costs of the economic policy will be compensated with the foreign partners' assistance. According to statements of representatives of the National Bank, thanks to the unprecedented help, now the state reserves exceed the pre-war level. Reported by Danilo Kobza from Kiev, specially for UA English.
So it was UA in English, Anna Nichenko. We broadcast from the heart of Europe, Ukraine, and we tell the truth about real situation connected with Russian invasion of Ukraine. See you tomorrow.